There are different spheres of governance. For example, like the state jurisdiction is in terms of wielding the sword, which is justice. It starts to become problematic when it becomes, I always call it like the Father Christmas figure, with this goodie bag and then it hands out the goodies. And then people have those expectations. That should be the church's role. So what is the role of the state and what is the role of society? And the two have distinctive roles, and when the one infringes into the other, that's when you have problems. The market has an important role to play. So what has happened is we've seen this political state coming in and almost seeing itself as omnicompetent, able to have this competence in every aspect, including the market, as opposed to this idea of the spheres of authority and responsibility based on dispersed knowledge. One of the problems we have in South Africa, our number one problem, is unemployment. But we've got a state and a political party. Okay, I know we've got the government of national unity, but you've got a political... Well, I think the ANC's forgotten that they didn't win. They have taken this approach of statism, that the state, as the authority, kind of encroaches into every other aspect because it's got this idea of omnicompetence. So what this critical social theory is a moralistic social analysis or a moralistic cultural analysis.
Okay.
So it comes from the idea of we know best. Remember, this is you can hear the roots of it. The rest of the society doesn't understand. They're in false consciousness. So what has happened is that university, the telos, or the purpose of a university, is that it's moved into what should be in terms of instead of what is. And then they created this boy into a girl and then started writing
as an experiment, lab rat child,
a baby, and then actually started writing up about it. And so people took on the idea, so gender is a social construct. But what they didn't do is follow through on what happened to this boy.
This episode of the In HeinzSight BoldCast is brought to you by addpay.
Dr. Nicola de Jager, welcome to the In HeinzSight BoldCast.
Thanks, Heinz. It's good to be here.
Thanks for joining me today. I'm so privileged to have you here. I know a little bit about you. We've spent some time and I've heard you speak, and we have some mutual friends, but many people may not know who you are. So just want to quickly fill them in, and I want you to also help with that. So you are you've got a PhD in political science, yes, and you are an associate professor at Stellenbosch University. Yes. Just tell us a bit more about that. How long have you been there? And then we'll get into it.
Sure. So I've been in the academia for over 21 years, 22 years.
Wow.
Yeah, but I've been at Stellenbosch for 16 years. But I'm on Old Marty, so I've returned. Also
your old stomping grounds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you in hostel?
I was.
Which one?
I was in Saruria.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Okay. I was also there way back in the day.
Which one?
I was just private race. Okay. So I was in Oudtshoorn.
Okay.
But I knew I had friends in most of the hostels. Yeah. Anyway.
Those were good years.
Yeah.
It was lots of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And where did the love, the fascination, the decision to go into political science start?
So when I get this question, I answer, as a little girl, I always dreamed of being a political scientist. And then people go, really? I'm like, no. And what are the chances?
Yeah, it's a big word.
Yes. So one of the things I did know is that I love teaching. So I would take my two grannies and I would take them into like a Wendy house, and we would do lessons, and I would torture them with the lessons, and because they never did their homework, and obviously the handwriting was terrible.
Yeah, you had to help them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not that my handwriting is any better.
What age were you about?
I can't remember.
Okay, but from early.
I feel like I always did it.
Okay.
If I had an opportunity to teach, I would teach.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So the gifting of teaching was just always part of your life. All
yeah.
Right.
So I always loved that. And then I went to Stellenbosch University and I started with law. And I took this extra subject called political science. So it looked interesting.
I actually know what that's like. I took law and I took political science, but I did not understand much of it. Okay. But obviously your story is different.
Yeah. So then I realized that I really didn't like the law.
Okay.
And then I had this extra subject called political science.
And it just triggered something.
Well, no. I just carried on with it.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I enjoyed it. And then I majored in it. And I thought, well, let me do my honours in it. And I did my honours in it. And then I thought, well, let me carry on. I'll do my master's.
Wow.
And then when I got married, my husband and I, we moved to Pretoria. And I got really bored staying at home. And so I went and I did my PhD in political science.
This episode of the In HeinzSight BoldCast is brought to you by addpay, a values-led fintech company committed to building with purpose. At addpay, we believe business is a calling, a platform to serve people with excellence, innovation, and integrity. We offer smart, scalable payment solutions that empower merchants, simplify transactions, and unlock financial inclusion across Africa. Our foundation is built on Matthew 6:33. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. That means we lead with faith, steward our business with accountability, and trust God as the ultimate provider. We are builders, not just of platforms and partnerships, but of something greater. We believe that when we honor him in how we work, lead, and grow, the impact reaches far beyond the bottom line. addpay, powering commerce with purpose, building for the kingdom.
Got bored and did a PhD.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Well, I did the PhD so that I could teach. Remember, I'm still on the teaching track.
Okay.
So
Were you not teaching since were you like a tutor and then moved up? And
no,
okay.
I did the whole lot.
All right.
So
All right.
I was a tutor. I was a junior lecturer. I worked my way up. So I did do teaching when I was doing my master's, and then obviously when I did my PhD, then I went into the teaching. So I kind of the sideline was political science, so that I could teach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's how I got into political science. And
Did you find that you have like just a natural talent, if you can call it that, for that direction, that field of study?
I found that I grew in the passion for it.
Okay.
Yeah. So if I look back, I mean, I can definitely say, okay, this was what the Lord wanted. Because
Okay.
it was definitely something that inadvertently seemed to happen, and I kind of moved into. What I've realized about the field of political science, as opposed to some of the other social sciences, is that it tends to be a more conservative field. So, which is
Okay.
interesting because it's about institutions. So it's about structures, and it's about government, and it's about order. So obviously later when I reflect on it, I realize, oh, wow, this is how I got into this field of the social sciences. Yeah.
So how would you define what political science is, for someone who's listening now and doesn't know actually what that field is about?
So it's a broad field, and inside of it, it's got many disciplines. So you've got your international relations, you've got your comparative politics, you've got your political behavior, your voting behavior, that type of thing inside there. But it's really broadly about government structures.
Okay.
So in terms of political structures, on the domestic level, national level, provincial level, but also then on a broader level. So your intergovernmental structures and those networks and interactions. So I think this is also why I love it. It's bigger picture.
Yeah.
I enjoy the bigger picture.
Okay.
And I realize that this is the structures in which we actually operate. So very, very important because it
Are you a structured person? You like the way for things to be in order and to work a certain way?
No.
No?
No.
Oh.
No, I see the value in it.
Okay.
I see the purpose in it. But when it's used to control people, then I think it's destructive. So I think order and structure can have benefit, but it can also be deeply destructive. So I think my interest in terms of the governance has moved into an area of realizing that it should be dispersed.
Okay.
It should never be centralized.
So that's an interesting point you're making. So where's that line where good structure of government is good for those who are being governed, and when does it go over to unhealthy control, like you just mentioned?
Yeah. Well, I think there's always the potential to go unhealthy because you're dealing with people.
Yeah.
So and we know that we are all fallen.
And power corrupts.
And power corrupts.
And absolute power corrupts absolutely.
And we love power. We have to actually recognize our fallibility and our frailty in this. So if I understand governance and I look at the word, then there are different spheres of governance. So when you go outside, you go in controlling when you move out of your jurisdiction.
Okay.
So, for example, like the state as a form of government, as one form of government, as a government, is its jurisdiction is in terms of wielding the sword, which is justice. So it starts to become problematic when it becomes, I always call it like the Father Christmas figure, with this goodie bag, and then it hands out the goodies.
You're talking about welfare?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah. So, and then people have those expectations instead of, so that should be the church's role, that should be family's role. Those are other forms of government. So when it actually moves out of its jurisdiction, its God-given jurisdiction, then it starts to, together with putting humans in there.
That's interesting. I always thought that political science was the study of things happening in this political sphere, but it's actually the science of understanding how it works or should work. So there's an ideal. Do I understand it correctly? And then, so do you guys look at what happens politically in the world and study it, or what is your sort of, you as a person with your background, looking at what's happening in the world, how do you, your lens must be so unique, the way you look at what's happening in our country, what's happening in America, especially right now with the upsets. It must be so interesting right now for you to be in your field.
Yes.
How do you process it, and how do you process it with your students?
Sure, it's a big question. So I just want to say that some would obviously define politics and the study of political science in terms of power. So that's the normal.
The study of power?
Yeah.
Okay.
And power relations.
That's very interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So that's often, so you've got, it's in terms of like regimes, you're looking at state-society relations. How does the state, and I think this is kind of the framework I look at. What is the role of the state and what is the role of society? And the two have distinctive roles, and when the one infringes into the other, that's when you have problems.
Yes.
And that's either way. So from the society side, when you get these social activist groups moving into the state, using the state for their purposes, in the same way when you get the state intruding into the private realm, then you have problems. So I would say that my kind of way of looking at it is in terms of these healthy state-society relations. I think we should be careful, and we'll get to this, is when it becomes how should it be, instead of what do we see. So
looking at the fruit rather than, interesting.
Yeah, because as academics, and I think this is something perhaps we're going to get into a little bit later, is what is the role of an academic? Is the role to say this is how life should be, or is it to study what is and then to see which works and which doesn't work?
Yeah. And I guess that's the whole question about what science is actually supposed to be.
Yeah.
Science is supposed to study the data, empirical evidence, and then be able to objectively, without emotion, make logical conclusions, right?
Yeah.
And then be able to compare apples with apples.
Yeah.
Like, okay, this is what's happening. This is the fruit. And maybe if this and this and this happens, the fruit can be different.
Yes.
Do I understand you correctly? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating field. We all have our callings, and I'm glad I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. It's not my thing, but it is fascinating though, and I think you probably I always laugh in social circles when someone hears someone's a hairdresser. The first question is, what do you think I should do with my hair? And if they hear someone's a physiotherapist, like, oh, I've got a pain here in my shoulder. Can you help me? So, I mean, when people hear you're a political scientist, do they immediately jump into political conversations and ask your opinion, or what do you typically experience in social circles?
Well, I normally get the question is like, what is that?
Okay.
What do you do? What does that mean? Yeah. So,
okay.
So the others will also go like, what's the future of South Africa going to be? So I often get that question.
I can imagine.
And I think, to dispel that, we don't look into a crystal ball, so we don't do predictive work. So that's not the role.
Okay. So I would also actually make that assumption. So it's good that you're teaching me how it really works.
Well, you can look at trends, and that's where theories come from.
Yeah.
It's like looking at what has happened in other countries, and this is where comparative politics is so interesting, because what has happened before, what were the trends, and what can you kind of postulate will happen, but you can't be predictive because you're dealing with people.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, you can't control it. It's not like a lab. You don't control people when you study them. So that's why also we always have to nuance what we're saying. So we have to, and this is a struggle for me, but have to gray what we're saying.
Okay.
It might be, it looks like
that
type of thing. Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm assuming that in your line, a big part of your study and knowledge is also history, the history of politics. To have a good understanding and a good grasp of that would be vital. But then also current events and studying what's happening. And I have so many questions, but you're actually helping me to ask them better, I think, with understanding how you work. But before we get into more of that, I would like to, you mentioned that you got married while studying. Please tell us a bit about Philip, your husband, and you've got children.
Yes.
You're also a mom. So you're a wife, you're a mom, you're this academic. Please tell us a bit more about your husband, your family. How long have you been married? A little bit more about that.
So Philip is also an academic. And
what field?
He's in finance. Yeah.
Okay.
So a little bit of a background in economics. He's actually a chartered accountant. Also Stellenbosch University.
All right.
That's not where we met, although we did know of each other. We hadn't yet seen each other, if that makes sense.
Okay.
But we had a group of friends who would mountain bike on the weekends, and they became a common feature on the weekends. It was the mountain biking and Philip. So
all right.
Yeah.
That's nice and healthy. Outdoors,
Absolutely.
exercise. Yeah.
So I always say he courted my brother and then told my brother, bring your sister along.
Yeah. Clever. That's a good move.
Yeah. So that's kind of how actually, this is a lovely story. Let me tell you this one. So this is how he figured out that I liked him. So at the end of one of these mountain biking days, then I was saying goodbye to everyone, and I hugged everybody, and I got to Philip, and then I
didn't hug.
And I didn't hug him.
It is a telltale sign.
Yeah, and then he was like, oh no, she likes me, that's for sure. They positively went.
That's a wise man. That's a wise man right there.
Yeah.
Okay. And then okay, what happened then after that?
No, then we obviously we dated and we got married, and we've been married. We just celebrated our 22 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
congratulations.
thank you.
That's a big number. I love 22 it's very non-relevant right now, but just a special number to my wife and I. But that's awesome. Yeah, congrats.
Yeah, thanks.
That's beautiful.
Thanks.
And you've got 2 children?
2 boys.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're now at the stage where you can't actually call them children. I mean, they obviously are our children.
Young men.
They're young men. So my eldest is 18. He started at Stellenbosch University. He's doing...
Wow.
Yeah.
The circle has come... Yeah, wow, full circle. That's beautiful.
No, it's very exciting. So it's exciting to kind of share, like be on campus with him.
Yeah.
Obviously not with him. I keep my space, but my distance. And I remember, like, I fetched them, and him and his cousin are also there together. They're starting together. They were born on exactly the same day. Yeah.
That's special.
Yeah, it's very special. And then they get in the car and I go, hey boys, how was your day? And then I realize I shouldn't be calling them boys because they are young men.
Yeah. I remember just being on campus myself and making that change from talking about being a child and being a man. It took a while. It took about a year for me to get used to that.
Yes.
I'm a man now, and the guys around me are men. Okay.
Yes.
But actually, when you really understand it, it's from about 13, 14 that you should be seen as a young man. But that's amazing. And what's field did he go into?
So David's in BSc, so he's doing the sciences.
Okay,
Yeah.
Natural sciences. Yeah.
And he's doing, it's bioinformatics. So it's a combination between biology and information science, or computer science. Sorry, let me get it right.
That's
science.
an interesting combo.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
It makes sense for these days we're in. So,
I think so.
I haven't heard of that course. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it's quite specialized. Very proud of him.
Well done.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And then my youngest is in grade 11 at Parel Filet, and he's doing also beautifully. What I love about boys is that they take their time, but once they hit it, then they go for it.
Okay.
So both of them, and I'm glad that we kind of took the brakes off for them in primary school. And then in high school, you just watch that developmental change happen and testosterone come in. It's amazing to watch.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really incredible to watch. And then this maturity that pops up on its own is very, very rewarding.
What do you mean by taking the brakes off in primary school?
Not to put pressure on them, especially with the boys. I think there's a lot of pressure on boys at school.
In terms of performance, academic, sports, all that stuff. Is that what you mean? Okay.
Yeah, the whole lot.
All right.
Yeah. And what we did and I know some people might not agree with it, but when we started to feel and see that the pressure was too much on them, we would say, okay, it's a day off today, and we would take them out.
Wow.
Just to kind of loosen that pressure.
Amazing.
But now, to watch from grade 10, 11, 12, my eldest was a little bit earlier, that they started to realize the importance of academics. And and then all of a sudden that kicked in.
There's something that is quite fascinating when a child realizes themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, if I want that, I actually need to do this.
Yeah.
And they start showing from their side. That's quite amazing.
And you need that.
Yeah.
They need to actually take the ownership of it. And to be the ones that drive it. And then you come alongside them. It's amazing.
Yeah. Otherwise, they are doing it just to please you.
Yeah.
Or because they're afraid of you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds healthy.
Yeah. And then so my youngest, he's a swimmer. So he's doing beautifully.
Okay. Wow. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Are you dealing with them having girlfriends yet?
So the eldest has a lovely girlfriend.
Okay, so you approve.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's good. That's good.
So when she came to our house for one of their parties, about 2 years ago, no, it was more. I looked at her and I was like, "This is a lovely young lady."
Great.
And he saw her too. So and they saw each other. So
okay.
I'm very proud of both of them for seeing each other.
Just on that, what to you as a mom of a boy, thinking, man, I want my boy to have a great marriage one day.
Yeah.
What was it about that young lady that stood out for you that made you think that?
She was quietly confident, and I like that.
Come on.
Yeah.
Oh.
So she
she knows who she is.
Yes.
She's not insecure.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So there was that security in herself, but it made her immediately come to us and say, "Hello, I'm Danielle." So she would approach us with a quiet confidence, which is, you could just feel the confidence of who she is.
That's amazing.
Yeah, lovely.
So, just to get to know you a little bit better, you gave your heart to the Lord in 97.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to hear your short version of your testimony. How did that happen, and what was your... Did you grow up in church? Was it like a huge new thing, or was it traditional church and then something happened? Or what is your story, your come to Jesus moment?
So I actually gave my life to the Lord when I was 12. That was the first time I gave my life to the Lord. So I grew up in a family with Christian values.
All right.
And but my family wasn't going to church, and I took myself to church. Yeah.
Interesting. Christian values, but not going to church.
Yeah.
All right.
So we went to it's changed now. They
Okay.
go to church.
Okay.
But I'm very grateful to my parents
Yeah.
because they have a loving marriage, and I grew up in a very healthy
huge.
family. Yeah, I know. Enormous. And so I think that created this, there wasn't a barrier when I approached the Lord, especially for my father. So I grew up with a very loving, very affirming father, but a strong father, and who I
What a
also
privilege.
I felt secure with. So I think that made it easy for me to relate to God.
Wow.
As my father.
And I mean, that there is such a powerful truth for any dad listening to hear.
Yeah.
I remember having this moment when Leon, my oldest, was just a few weeks old.
Yeah.
It's a whole testimony, but the one thing that came out was that I felt God just kind of whispered in my spirit, being, you, Heinz, is Leon's first impression of me, God.
So true.
And I was like, wow. I said, Lord, how can I ever?
Yeah.
He said, you can't.
Yeah.
But with me, you can.
Yeah.
At least get close, by the leading of the Holy Spirit. And that changed my life as a parent.
So
and I mean, you are testifying of how important that is. And a dad who models a healthy father to a child, it takes away so many barriers.
Yeah.
As you said, barriers to the father. That's a powerful way of saying it.
Yeah.
And so you had this encounter.
Yeah. So but obviously from 12 onwards, I backslid. But the truth, I always knew what the truth was. And I must say that the Lord was relentless.
Okay.
So he took me at my word of when I committed my life to him when I was 12. Even if I was unfaithful, he was relentless.
He remained faithful.
He remained faithful.
Wow.
Yeah. And then it was in my honors year at Stellenbosch University. So, those first 3 years were fairly wild. And then the emptiness comes, the emptiness of those pursuits, but also the truth that I knew in my heart that there was a God, and I would have to give account about my life. And I knew that I was not bringing him honor. So I never called myself a Christian because I knew that this was not reflective of who he was.
Not because you were ashamed of people around you. It's more like you don't think you represent him well.
No.
Do I understand you right?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then I got to a point where I just said, "Oh, okay, Lord, I'm done. Just if you can pitch around about now, that would really be good."
Yeah.
And then a very faithful friend started to share a testimony with me, and I can't remember a word that she said. What I was thinking, just invite me to church.
Yeah.
Just invite me to church.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And then she invited me to church, and then all I was like, just give the altar call. I don't know what you're saying. I just need to get right with the Lord. I know I need
just
to
give me an opportunity.
Yeah. Just.
Yeah.
Yeah, so at the moment the altar call came up, then I was like at the front.
Wow.
Yeah. But then I also realized that that was going to be, he was going to want everything.
Yes.
Yeah, so when it was a commitment, it was not that I did it immediately, but I understood it.
Yeah. You count the cost. It was that part of it.
That's it.
Which is such a huge thing I think a lot of people don't realize, the truth of that.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, and did you, from that moment on, experience would you say it was a radical shift, or was it more like you just stepped into the right gear for the first time, or how would you explain the shift in your personal life, your personal relationship with him from that point on?
Just relief.
Wow.
It was just relief.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so just knowing that I was like in contention with him. And then that's kind of coming right with him.
Interesting, hey? Giving your life at 12 and he doesn't let you go.
No.
And nothing fills that void like him.
No.
And then you come to, I mean, for me, it sounds a lot like the prodigal son story.
Yeah.
There was a moment where you came to yourself.
Yes.
And you're like, I can't do this. But at my father's house, and isn't that so? That's all of our stories at some point. You know, we need a moment of going, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And then God's like, finally.
Yeah.
Now I can work with you.
Waiting for you to get to this.
It changes everything. But also you just knowing that the heart of the Father, that you can go back.
Absolutely.
I think that's key, hey?
Yeah.
Wow.
And again, that relationship with my father then meant that I've never struggled to boldly go into his presence. Because I've never struggled to understand that he's for me, that he loves me. But also at the same time that I must submit everything. Yeah.
And would you say that choosing your husband, or knowing that this is your husband, was that a step of faith as well, that you feel led by God? Or did you just feel God all over it from the start? How was that experience? Because the reason I'm asking is I find that many people who call themselves Christians, they do not include God really in the major decisions of their lives, which I think are marriage, children and how many, where should I live, and what do I do with my life to build the kingdom? I think those are givens that you have to do that in partnership with God.
Absolutely.
But what was your experience in terms of choosing your partner for life?
So I didn't always get it right.
Okay.
So although I knew, but the Lord was also patient with me. So I went into another relationship which I shouldn't have.
Okay.
And then you just kind of have that uneasy feeling.
You just know.
You just know. And then with Philip, I remember we went out for a coffee. And then I was like, I remember I phoned a good friend of mine, and I think I phoned my mom, and I said, I've met my husband.
Wow.
Yeah, so I knew, but it was complicated. there was a point where I thought, okay, I need to be right with the Lord in this. And I went to him and I said to Philip, and I said, I'm going to have to end it. And he said no, and he assured me in terms of where my concerns were that I didn't need to be concerned. And I'm grateful for that moment, because I know that I put the Lord first.
Wow.
And then so I could go in with peace into the relationship.
All right.
Yeah, and then it was amazing.
Was it many people talk about this, so I just want to know if it was the same for you. I mean, you had a good dad, you have a good father, he was loving, he made you feel safe and all that stuff. How much of what you had in your have in your father did you see in Philip that made you think, yes, this, because many people say you marry someone like your father or like your mom. Was that the same for you, or is Philip very different, or what was that experience like?
I think there are similarities in the sense that what I appreciate about Philip is that he's focused. So, and that's what I appreciated also about my dad. Like, very focused on his family, focused on his wife, focused on his priorities.
He's got them straight.
He's got them straight.
Yeah.
And that I saw that in Philip, was the focus.
I don't know Philip that well, but what I do know about him, I mean, we shared at Wilberforce Academy, we shared a place. We stayed at the same place the one night, and I just find him to be like a gentle giant. You know, he seems very strong, although he seems kind of reserved at the beginning. But when he opens his mouth, you can listen. You know, and you guys make such a power couple for me. I think you guys are awesome. So
thanks.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right. So
can I touch on, you said the children?
Yes.
Because you said, we need to commit to all these aspects.
Of course.
So the children is also quite a testimony for me.
Great. Please share.
So when it comes to children, I mean, I went to university, and we can chat about this as well, but I really took that kind of angle of going more the feminist route. I was always I was an activist.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I understand this activism. So I was going in that trajectory.
May I ask why? Were you that sort of typical thing of you never thought about it, then you got to university and then all these ideas were thrown at you? Or,
definitely.
Oh, so it started there.
It was at the university.
Wow.
Definitely.
Interesting.
And then also into the environmental area. So I know that I'm a cause fighter, but I definitely got sucked into those things. And then
climate change, all that stuff.
It wasn't yet climate change.
Oh, they're calling it global warming. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So kind of into that activist environment.
Have you ever thrown paint on a painting?
No.
Not okay. Good.
No.
I see. That's the new thing.
No. We did actually alien tree hacking. So we actually did good stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we actually did good stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think that was inside as well. This kind of like, I want to kind of rebel that I'm somehow going to be in a marriage. I'm going to be forced into having children.
All right.
And that's going to come against my career, and that's
wow.
where's my freedom to choose my career. So that was there, and I remember being reading the scriptures, which speaks about what is the purpose of marriage. It's to have children. And this was one of the things I went to the pastor's wife, and I went to a friend who had many children, and I said, well, I'm dealing with this, what should I do? And she says, no, you must have children.
Yeah.
So having children was I went to the Lord and I said, okay, this one's yours.
Yeah.
I hand this over to you.
If you want me to have, then yeah. Wow.
No, and I know you want me to have. I said, but I need you to shift my heart. And
Okay.
So I completely gave it to him.
Wow.
And so my children it even makes me emotional, is his grace.
Sure.
And his goodness.
Beautiful. Because
he gave me that scripture which says that in him there's no darkness or shadow of turning. He's all light and goodness, and he gives good and perfect gifts.
Yeah. All good gifts are from the God of the Father of lights.
Yeah. In him there's no shadow of turning. There's no darkness in him. He's just good. And that he gives, and that was because he understands that I enjoy gifts. So he expressed my children as gifts.
Wow.
And then when I had them, and now I'm like, oh, I could have missed out on that.
Wow. Sure.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
But I mean, that for me is such a a powerful testimony as well. That, I think what I'm hearing is that God put certain gifts in you. And that thing of making a change in the world, wanting to make a change in the world was God-given.
Yeah.
But then something happens, like you're young, you're impressionable, you get to university, there's all these people that are so impressive, and these books and these terms and stuff, and you get sucked up into that, and you're like, maybe this is the cause.
Absolutely.
And you get sidetracked.
Yeah.
I'm now an activist for all these things, and meantime, God's like, no, my daughter, I have this plan for you. But you just, there's a path, to find your way. And I mean, for me, if I can equate it, it was, I had a word from the Lord when I was you're still quite young, and I wanted to force it in a certain way that sounded right to me and felt right to me, and then it came crashing down, and I was depressed. And He had to come and show me, I needed you to kind of get that out of your system and see that that's not the real thing, but I've got something so much better.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing something about that in your story. Am I tracking? Does it make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And then you have now, since with your knowledge, your experience, and what you focus on, you've got a passion that you want to see people have a healthy worldview, and you want them to understand the times that we're in.
Yeah.
And we are living in very interesting times. I mean, politically, on every level, society is in a very interesting place. Faith, religion, economics, everything is in a weird space.
Yes.
So let's talk a bit about that. Where did the conviction in you come from to stand up, which is what you're doing, on a campus that is, from what I can tell, has become quite secular, and stand up for the truth from the Word of God?
Yeah.
What does that look like? Where did that conviction come from? And tell us a bit more about that, and I'll ask questions as we go.
Yeah. So when I was at University of Pretoria first, and when I was there, I was doing my PhD, and I was teaching. So I was a young academic, and I remember I was at this conference, and then at lunchtime we sat around, and then everybody had these very big words, and I didn't know what they were saying.
Okay.
And they all sounded incredibly smart and incredibly intelligent, and I felt
kind of intimidating. Yeah.
And I remember like fleeing to my room. And I was going, sure, Lord, I don't think this is for me. I'm not sure this is where I should be. And He gave me the word from Colossians 2, which says that in Christ is hidden all wisdom and knowledge. Wow. And then He says, beware of vain and empty philosophies, deceitful philosophies, and the elemental spirits of this world.
Sure.
And so that was the assurance. And from then on, I knew, okay, this is where I must be. I must be in this environment. And I can trust Him.
Yeah.
That He's a source of wisdom and knowledge.
Amen.
I mean, we get access to Jesus.
Yes.
The source of wisdom
Who
and
knows
knowledge.
all. Yeah.
And it's not like He then downloads it. It would really be nice, but He doesn't.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
Like a matrix.
Yes, just pop it in. But he actually, so He's also says that He's got good works laid beforehand, that we should walk in them. And I mean, if we trust Him, please lead us.
Yeah.
Lead me in your good works.
Yeah.
So from there, and I think it's a process, and it takes time. When you look back, you can see the Lord in it, but He doesn't give it to us because He knows we can't handle it all at once. He knows that we need to grow in it.
Yeah.
And I think there were key moments after that where. I was just an academic. I was just studying. I was just doing my PhD. I was just teaching. There were courses. What I did do is I tried to align it with what does the Word say. So I did studies in what is biblical governance. What does a biblical form of governance look like? What is in the Word?
Yeah.
And so that when I teach, let me not be in contention with the Lord. And then
that's good.
So I teach what I teach. If you look at the Word, it's so full of this. It's incredible, like the separation of powers. It's there.
Okay.
The limitation of the state, the role of the market, the importance of family. It's all there in the Word, and it actually brings a thriving society.
Yeah.
So, I mean, through my studies and through working, I saw this, but there were two pivotal moments for me. which moved me into this worldviews. It was, 2015 with the protests on the campus,
Okay.
the student protests.
Yes.
There were a couple of us Christians, and we, you're kind of like, something's not right here. So you kind of sense that there's a grievance, but there's also something underlying that doesn't feel right.
Yeah, something in the spirit, not just in the physical. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that the fees must fall thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think from there started to kind of like try and unravel what is going on and what is behind this. And then the other moment was what I think we're going to get to as well, is what happened in the schooling environment where we started to see the issues around gender dysphoria.
Yeah.
And the response to that.
Yeah.
And again, that something's not right here.
Yeah.
This is it. Yes, your heartstrings are pulled because there's someone's hurting, there's a pain here.
Yeah.
But the response doesn't feel right.
Yes.
And I think so that moment was a bit of a shifting in terms of trying to kind of unravel what is underlying here. What are the vain and deceitful philosophies that are underlying here?
Sure.
And I think also recognizing that as Christians we fall into those things. And so then I've been teaching worldviews and governance and so forth, and learning as I go along, uncovering, learning and exposing, because it's the thing is that we realize we always be contended for.
Yeah. Are some of these things you're mentioning, there's a term that you use, sphere-based authority. Tell us a bit more about that, and how does it tie in with what you're talking about? So
I think, well, the Lord delegates authority. So he is ultimate authority, but then he actually brings us in as co-creators in on this world. In terms of he's created everything, but in terms of bringing civilization and bringing order and structure, and that we are co-laborers. Let me rather use that word. We are co-laborers with him, and that he leads and guides us and empowers us in it. But in the co-laboring, he's actually given us these spheres of authority. So as parents, we have a sphere of authority, and that sphere of authority is for our children. And actually that's teaching them in the way of the Lord and teaching them in his ways, and that's also guarding from those ideas that want to come in and actually lead them astray. But also that when it comes to, when I delegate to a school, there's a limitation in terms of what they can and cannot say. But I still get to input, because I'm still the ultimate, my husband and I, the ultimate authority when it comes to that. So that's
I love that, and that's a God-given authority. It's built into the way he made the world, right? So if anyone goes against that, there will be an unnatural feel almost.
Yes.
Like if someone tries to raise your children in a way, especially that's against your way, then you start getting this weird tension, right? Like I mean, we know that in America there's been this effort to circumvent parents, and even in our own nation they're trying to write stuff into law that the school can circumvent certain things and get to the kids without the parents' consent even, which is very scary. So is that what you're talking about? Is that we should have healthy boundaries around the spheres of authority?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Because that's how a healthy society operates.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, this is great.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's another example?
So another example would be the church.
Yes.
So the church also has an authority. So it wields a different sword, which is the word. So it actually teaches doctrine, and it raises doctrine and moral issues. But it also has a
God-given sphere.
A God-given sphere and jurisdiction.
Okay.
So one of those things is that you don't move that into the state, because the state, its sphere of authority, it wields a sword, which is justice. So it has a coercive arm. And the problem with that is that when you move the church into that, you can actually move into coercion. So like we had with the Holy Roman Empire, where you actually coerce people into Christianity. You can't do that. That's the Lord's sphere. That's the heart sphere. So the church has a role and responsibility in terms of facilitating that in terms of the word, but you can't coerce that. It can never be coerced.
So you would say yes to separation of church and state, but
Yes.
in the right way.
Yes, in terms of jurisdiction. What is the
Yes.
responsibility of the church? What is the responsibility of the state? But should we have a Christian influence and an ethos and values and norms? And should it be governed? Should we govern the state in accordance with what the Lord has for the government? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think
Okay.
that's that healthy. It doesn't mean that Christians shouldn't be in the public sphere
Yeah.
at all, or that we shouldn't see what is God's purpose for government, what's God's purpose for political government,
Yeah.
and to see that, and it's limited. It's very limited.
Sure. So it's about understanding, first of all, that there are these spheres of
Yeah.
authority. Secondly, there's a healthy way
Yeah.
to run them.
Yes.
To what's the right word? Help me, academic. to make it happen.
To operate.
To
inside.
operate inside those. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they all need basically healthy boundaries, from what I understand.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So family, church, state.
Yeah.
What others are there that you've recognized, or
Well, there's market.
market, which
And
is business, I'm
business,
assuming, yeah.
Yeah. And then underlying it is self-government. So I would say that this is also a sphere of authority.
Self-government.
Self-government.
Do you mean individuals, or do you mean ethnos, groups of people together?
Individuals.
Individuals governing themselves.
And it's the fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah.
It's self-government. But we govern...
Please explain that.
Yeah.
That's an interesting statement, yeah.
So obviously all authority comes from the Lord, and we are submitted under Him,
Yeah.
under His authority. But then He first foremost requires us to govern ourselves, to govern our emotions, to govern our thoughts, to govern our actions, to govern our behavior.
Yeah.
And that's the fruit of the Spirit, of self-government. And so can you imagine how different the world would be if people governed themselves?
In a good way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a good way, because and if you look at the prerequisites in terms of leadership, especially going to church leadership, is do you govern yourself well? Do you govern your family well? And then you can go into the church.
I hear what you're saying. Like Paul writing to Timothy about what an elder, his life should look like.
Yes.
He should be able to run his own household before he can lead.
Yes.
Is that what you're talking
Yes.
about? Okay.
But if you look at the earlier characteristics, it's like it's not given over to greed and not given over to selfish pursuit.
Yes.
And so it actually speaks about an internal government first.
All
So I
right.
always call this the inside out.
Okay.
So governance is always inside before it goes outside. So if people first govern themselves, then they are equipped to go into a position of external governance or institutional governance, if that makes sense.
So just as a layperson
Yeah.
listening to you, hearing that term, what I understand by governing is that that's a form of leading.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you... So help me just to understand
Yeah.
it better. So I'm going to ask a question that might be a stupid question, but isn't governing leading in any way? So even someone who's not living a healthy lifestyle or doing, he's governing himself,
Yes.
but not in a good way.
Yes.
So you say the answer is self-governance, but shouldn't we qualify that then more specifically?
Okay, maybe this will help. So there's a dictionary, it's the Noah Webster Dictionary, 1828.
28, I
Yeah.
follow it as well.
Yes.
It's a good one.
Yeah. So I think it was the first actually English dictionary.
Mm.
And if you look at the word government there,
Yeah.
the first words of government is control and restraint.
All right.
So it actually talks about restraint.
So
it's
government implies restraint.
It implies restraint.
Ah.
Yeah. And then if you look at how it then defines government, it says the individual government of your conduct and
Wow.
your emotions
That's amazing.
and your character. And then it goes the government of the family. And then it only goes into public government. So your early definition
Wow.
of government recognized these spheres of authority and these jurisdictions, and it was a level of restraint.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah,
Oh my goodness, we just need to return to that.
absolutely.
That's powerful.
It is super powerful. And can you imagine if our leaders understood that?
Yeah.
So I just think about what happened in our so-called 9 lost years in South Africa with a leader and a Jacob Zuma who
Yeah.
didn't restrain himself. He
Yes.
didn't restrain himself financially, and he didn't restrain himself sexually.
Mm.
And in that, he made himself vulnerable to be manipulated, and that had ramifications for the whole country.
Yeah, everyone was pulled into that. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Wow.
So also you can have a look at, again, in the Word, when it speaks about, it's in Deuteronomy, about the requirements of a leader, a political leader. And one is it not given over to bribery, not given over to having riches, and not given over to many wives.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and that's self-restraint.
Come on.
So you say
So
no?
when you say self-governance, using the proper original definition of the word, it implies healthy restraint.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm learning so much.
Okay.
This
good.
is great. That's such a powerful understanding of things. All right, so we've had those spheres now. Are there any others? Market was the last one.
Yeah. So markets, and I think market, especially in this current global environment, is getting a very bad rap.
Okay.
And the market has an important role to play. So what has happened is we've seen this political state coming in and almost seeing itself as omnicompetent, able to have this competence in every aspect, including the market.
Yeah.
As opposed to this idea of the spheres of authority and responsibility based on dispersed knowledge.
Are we talking about privatization?
Yes.
In the government of things like airlines and whatever?
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the problems we have in South Africa, our number one problem, as identified by South Africans, is unemployment.
Yes.
It outstrips anything else.
Yeah.
They want employment. But we've got a state and a political party. Okay, I know we've got the government of national unity, but you've got a political... Well, yeah. One would want... You forget... Well, I think the ANC's forgotten that they didn't win.
Yeah, it's like they're just going ahead like nothing changed.
I know.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's very frustrating.
Yeah.
But they have taken this approach of statism. And statism is that the state, as the authority, kind of encroaches into every other aspect because it's got this idea of omnicompetence.
Yeah, like we know it all, we can do it all, and we should do it all.
Yeah. And so
which is a form of pride, let's be honest. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
And it's got Marxist roots.
I was just going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
But they're socialist in their being, the ANC, so that would make sense, that they would move to that space.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that it brings in that ideology of that the state, everything for the state, nothing but the state, that old Giovanni.
Everything belongs to the state, even the children.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they come with the Lenin idea of the Vanguard Party. The Vanguard Party, and you'll see they also refer to themselves as the Vanguard Party. Again, it's obviously the ANC is made of, it's not uniform, so there are different ideas inside there. So in general, so this idea of the Vanguard Party is that it will lead for you. It knows better, and that's a deeply Marxist idea.
Yeah.
So, and then that's why it also wants to control the economy, and that's why we don't grow. Our economy doesn't grow because we stifled our entrepreneurs. We've stifled our small, medium enterprises. Instead of, they are the generators of jobs. Yeah. This is what the research shows.
But you throttle them with stuff like BEE and everything else it's completely focused on the wrong thing and should be focused on developing and encouraging people who are willing to work hard and make a change. But when you give basically stuff for free to those who haven't earned it and haven't worked hard, you create this unhealthy environment, and people take without giving back. And I think that's really bad. My other criticism that I think is one of the worst things we can do is to have welfare, where welfare is just handing out stuff. And now you've got 10-year-old girls getting pregnant just to get 350 Rand a month. It's like, it's insane. What is that? There should be some form of responsibility and quid pro quo. But like you've said, and this has really broken this thing open to me, when the state says to you, you can't govern yourself, you need us.
Yes.
They're taking self-governance away.
Absolutely.
That's what's happening.
That's what's happening. Wow. That is what's happening. And once you've actually taken that away, you've actually taken away someone's dignity.
Yeah.
And in that, you can control them. Once you've taken their dignity away, they become controllable.
Crazy.
So what is the most dignifying thing you can do for people, especially men, is give them work.
Yeah, because once again,
meant to work.
God created us that way, to work. And in that, there's purpose. There's a reason to get up in the morning. There's a reason to take care of your family. And that's so important.
And that came before the fall.
Yeah.
To work and tend the land is a blessing.
Yeah, we were just not going to sweat.
Yeah.
But after the after the curse, you're going to work hard.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
You're crazy. This is so interesting. And okay, so let's bring this through to how you and I met. You and I met I think we met sort of socially probably a few times, but the real connection was when I was in the news because of the transgender child at the Whip Primary where my children are.
Yeah.
And quick background, what happened there was we were told that a certain biological boy would be incorporated into the school as a girl, and the school is just going to make as if he is a girl, and the rest of us just have to go along with it.
Yeah.
There was no process, there was no communication beforehand. We were just told.
Yeah.
Then I asked a few fathers to join me in engaging the school board, and we started asking questions, challenging the process, and how's this going to work? How's this going to affect my child? Because we were completely caught off guard and unawares. And then someone leaked that process to the newspaper, and it became a big story, and there was a lot of social media backlash, and it became quite a thing. And then I was very privileged to talk to you, to talk to Ryan from Cause for Justice, and a few other people. That was amazing. So maybe start by saying why, because I know you also engaged the school about what happened there, because your children were there. What motivated you to not just be quiet and take it, and why were you willing to help me in that time?
Sure. So I was actually part of the prayer group at De Hoop at the time, and we had been obviously praying for the school. So it was a bit of a surprise when I remember the email came out, and it was like, how did this happen?
Yeah.
Where did this come from?
That's exactly how I felt.
Yeah, and I think because I'd somewhat touched in the philosophies around it, that I realized that this had philosophical roots rather than real roots, if that makes sense. So gender dysphoria is real.
Yes.
I would say transgender is ideological.
Yes.
So having a child who's confused about their gender is a real what do we call it? It's bodily dysmorphia. So similar to anorexia, when you think that you're fat but you're actually thin. So it's real. But what has happened is you've got these ideological underpinnings that have come through in the culture for some of your philosophers like your Judith Butler and your Simone de Beauvoir, who've said that you become a woman. You aren't a woman, you become a woman. And this idea that you can imagine what gender you want to be. And so there were these ideas which are coming from the social sciences, not from the empirical research. But at the same time, you've got another kind of stream coming in your psychologists. I mean, like your Dr. John Money, deeply problematic person who did an experiment on two boys. So what happened was the parents had these twin boys, and they had some urinary infections, and they were advised to get them circumcised. And when they were circumcising the one as a baby, there was apparently like an electrical surge that went through, and his little penis got burnt off.
Yeah.
So then the parents were advised to go to Dr. John Money, and he used this as an opportunity. And his opportunity, he said, no, what we need to do is gender is just a social construct.
Yeah.
You can just imagine it. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create him into a girl.
Wow.
And so
it starts with that idea.
There's the idea.
Which is a philosophy.
It's a philosophy.
And you were talking about man-made philosophies that sound like high ideas.
Yeah.
And I keep coming back to 2 Corinthians 10. We have weapons that are mighty in warfare for pulling down strongholds, lofty ideas, and in these things. And this is one of those.
This is one of those.
Yeah.
This is one of the. But then he enacts on the idea.
Yeah.
So he actually enacts it, and then they created this boy into a girl. And then started writing
as an experiment, lab rat child,
a child,
a
baby.
Yeah.
But if you and then actually started writing up about it, and so people took on the idea. Oh, so gender is a social construct.
Wow.
But what they didn't do is follow through on what happened to this boy.
Yeah.
And or what this Dr. John Money was doing.
The fruit? Yeah.
Yeah. So actually what he was doing, he was bringing both of them in, these two boys in, and he was experimenting with them in terms of getting them to do sexual acts with each other. This is a deeply problematic. This is the basis of this gender.
This is where it comes from.
This is where it comes from.
Yeah.
So this man is actually, he's an advocate of pedophilia.
Yeah.
And he's an advocate of what is now called this
minor attracted person. Yeah. The MAPS.
One of these euphemistic words.
Yeah, they're trying to make it sound not as horrible as it is.
As it is.
Yeah.
And actually eventually both of these brothers committed suicide.
Of course, they were wrecked.
Yeah, they were totally destroyed.
That's horrible.
And so it was a failed experiment on children. Yeah. And now these ideas have fed into our curriculum, have fed into the kind of ethos of the culture at the moment that that gender is a social construct. But it was a failed experiment.
Yeah.
It was a deeply unethical experiment. And then these are ideas which have come from philosophies, and now they are feeding into the schools. So I think that's that type of stuff that then I realized this is what's happening.
This is where it's coming from. Yeah. When it happened in our own backyard, in our own school, this is now in your face.
Yeah. And I remember contending with it as well. And I remember feeling the sense that I was the unloving one, made to feel like you're unloving. And then having to contend
That's their biggest argument.
Yeah. What does it mean to love? Do you love someone into, like, if someone's anorexic, do I love them to say, okay, I'm going to start?
Yeah, you are fat.
Yeah.
You are fat. You should not eat.
Yeah, I'm going to hurt you.
Yeah. Is that loving?
Is it? Yeah.
Wow.
And so I think this is that thing, was that it was, you're kind of contended with, you're not loving. But it was like, but this is not the truth. And
I mean, I'm sure maybe it was the same for you, but when you speak to people that you kind of go, but you're actually a normal person with a normal background.
Yeah.
And you're now saying these things as if you think it's real. Yeah. To the point that I start going, maybe I'm wrong. Because everyone is repeating the same lie. But then you realize, no. They drank the Kool-Aid and it's not the truth.
No.
But it's taken their thoughts hostage.
Yeah.
Because if you hear something enough and you partner with that idea, then it becomes your thinking.
Yeah.
And that's what we saw, right?
Yeah.
And what was your experience of confronting, getting communication back, fighting that fight? What was that experience like for you?
It was tough.
Yeah.
It was tough because I think this was also, was new for all of us. We were all trying to kind of navigate what is happening here, what's going on, where did this come from, and how did we get so quickly to this point where you are socially transitioning a boy, but there isn't real long-term medical evidence for what is going to happen to this child. And I remember feeling confronted with that, am I unloving? Am I unkind?
Yeah.
Am I the hateful person in this? And then having people like Dr. Alan Duncan and doctors who were actually looking at it. What is the science behind it? What is the research behind it? And what happens to these young people if you left
in the long run?
Yeah, but also if you left them alone.
Yeah.
If
you don't intervene with these hectic strategies.
Yeah, they actually stop.
Yeah.
They just need to go through puberty. And 80 to 90% of them just realize, oh no, I am a girl. I am a boy.
But that is actually, from what I understand from the research, that's in the very few real gender dysphoria cases.
Yes.
Where that is a high percentage who just need to go through puberty and then they realize themselves.
Yes.
So, and then there's still a very small percentage of the small percentage that might keep struggling, but then there's still psychological help for them.
Yes.
But what we're also talking about now is how something that's a real illness for a very small number has suddenly, in that COVID time, became a fad.
Yes.
It became like you said, there's the ideology part that took hold of a whole generation, it seems.
Yeah.
And just became the in thing to be.
Yes.
And people just started saying that. And then it went from I'm changing my gender to I'm changing my species.
Yes.
Now I'm a furry and I'm a turtle and I'm a whatever.
Yeah.
And it just got insane. You know, imagination suddenly became reality to people, and it's still not reality. But it's this fight for what is objectively true.
Yes.
And just from your perspective, if you look at these things, how would you how would you advise people to look at the world and process what's happening from a objective, subjective reality point of view? Because that's a big thing we're contending for, I think.
Yeah. So I think with this is that reality will come back and bite. You know, so you can pretend.
Yeah.
And so look at the fruits of it.
Yeah.
And there's much now that is available. So people actually can't pretend that you can actually just become from a girl to a boy.
But they still do, though. They still like relentlessly proclaim this. But I'm listening. Sorry.
Yeah. But I mean, then
there's a lot of evidence against it. Yeah.
But I mean, that also comes with the whole postmodern idea where it actually rejects reality.
Truth. It rejects truth. Yeah.
But if you look at, I mean, like the testimonies of people like Chloe Cole.
Wow, that's heart-wrenching.
It's heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
So I mean, I encourage people, go and have a look at the detransitioners. Look at their testimonies of what has happened to them. They've been turned into lifelong medical patients.
Yeah.
And they have
sterilized, can't have children.
Yeah.
Bone density is gone.
Yes.
They are leaking in places. It's horrendous.
Yeah. I mean, and for the boys that are told that they can become girls, like, so they cut their penises off and they create these crevices. But because the body sees it as a wound, the body keeps trying to heal it.
Yeah.
So they actually, I mean, some of these moms say, no, well, we have to put tampons inside the hole to keep the hole open. I mean,
oh my word!
I mean, this is horrendous.
And the scary thing is that it's done with this whole thing of care.
Yeah,
we are caring for. It's affirmative care.
I can't. That you have to know what happens to these children, and then please tell me that it's caring and love. You can't do it. You can't.
Not from a rational, realistic point of view.
Yeah.
And you know what breaks me is that everyone's going along. It's like the emperor's new clothes.
Yeah.
He's naked, but everyone tells him he's got clothes.
Yeah.
And it's like, your boy is a girl. Yeah, sure, it's fine. We all look at this young person that's actually broken on the inside, not getting help, and everyone just plays along, and it just breaks my heart.
Yeah.
And people think, like you say, they think we hate.
No.
But it's the exact opposite. My heart is broken for that child's future. Because one of the lies they use to get you to fold is to tell you, well, if you don't affirm this child, they will probably commit suicide. You know what? If you do affirm them, the probability increases by 50% that they will commit suicide. Because they're not who God made them to be. And they're going to fight, and it's going to end up in such a devastating thing. It's better to just let the child go through puberty and take it from there. Why can we tell a child you can only drive when you're 18? You can only get a gun license when you're 18. You can only do these things when you're 21. But sure, you can choose your gender, which is like such a big part of your identity for the rest of your life at 5. Like, what is that? No, it makes no sense.
It makes no sense.
It's an insane ideology that's gripped the world. I thank God for the pushback that I'm seeing.
Yes.
But what do we do? What do we do as parents in our local communities to help to be part of the solution? Do you think?
So I think part of what has happened is that the adults stepped out of the room.
Sure.
And we allowed other people to come in. And those spheres of authority.
Yeah, which is back to your point.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think as parents, and this is actually where I think this radical gender ideology has gone too far, is when it started to touch children. And then all of a sudden, watch the mama and papa bears come out.
Yeah.
Because when you touch people, and this is what God has
You've gone too far now.
Yeah. What God places in our heart. When you start touching the children, when you start touching our children, that's when you go too far.
Yeah.
You know, so if you want to believe these things and do this as adults, that's an adult decision.
Yeah.
Don't think it's good for you.
Yeah.
Because that's not who you create.
It will be devastating, but make an adult decision. Yeah.
But when adults allow children, instead of being the guardians of them, to do this, then I think adults have abdicated their responsibility.
Yes.
And I think it's time for the adults to, I love this expression, to put the big pants on.
Yeah.
And step up and actually say no.
Yeah.
And sometimes children need a hard no. And that's what they're looking for.
Yeah, they are.
Is a no, but also a loving.
Healthy boundaries.
Yeah. I don't want to. Have we got time to kind of unpack the deeper?
Yes, please.
Philosophical roots behind this. I mean, I'm going to go right back into the Marxism and that, because as you kind of this is what I'm working on at the moment, is kind of trying to unravel, where does this all come from? What are these philosophies that have kind of fed into this?
Yeah.
So kind of like your kind of umbrella philosophy would be critical social theory.
Yeah.
And under that, you have your radical gender ideology, your queer theory, which we can also speak about, et cetera, et cetera. But where did that come from?
Yeah.
So that goes back into the Marxism. So Karl Marx, he said that society was structured into your proletariat, your working class, and your bourgeoisie. And that the whole of society was structured in terms of these power relations, and the bourgeoisie always suppressed and oppressed your working class. And that to free them, you would have to have a revolution, a violent revolution. The working class needed to rise up and overthrow your bourgeoisie. And then miraculously, everyone would turn good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be this utopia.
It will be a utopia.
Yeah. And the state will just run everything and it'll be perfect.
Yeah, it's going to be perfect. But eventually he said the state would wither away because we're all living in perfect harmony. That was the idea, this utopia. I mean, never done before, never seen, never, there's no evidence of this ever happening.
Let's just, for a moment, just mention that Marx was a man.
Yeah.
He was white.
Yeah.
And from the West, I think.
Germany.
He's German.
Yeah.
And he came up with this idea, which is very interesting.
It's very interesting.
Because on the high scale of oppressors are white men from the West.
Yeah, yeah. So if we're going to deconstruct, should we start there?
So interesting.
Yes. So I'm all for it. Let's start with that one. And then we just deconstruct onwards. Absolutely. But what happened during World War I and World War II, the expectation of your Marxists there on out, they expected the working class, because he said it was a historical inevitability that your working class would rise up and that they would overthrow the whole capitalist system and that you would have socialism and you would have this perfect utopia. Although he didn't call it utopia, he said it was science. And it was a historical inevitability.
Okay.
And this was what was best for society. So you weren't allowed to contend with it, because then you were contending with what would be the perfect outcome for society.
Okay.
But what happened is that didn't happen. So his historical inevitability, his science did not fulfill. And then you had these subsequent Marxists and the neo-Marxists and those that went into the Frankfurt School, so like Antonio Gramsci. So Antonio Gramsci looked at this and he said, well, what's the problem? Why did the working class, especially during...
Not rise up.
Yeah, why didn't they rise up?
Yeah.
Why did these working class men go to war for their country, for their families, for their nations, and for the values of freedom?
So the premise of that question is they shouldn't be doing that.
Yes.
And they shouldn't be doing it because they're being oppressed to do it. Right? That's the premise.
That's the premise, yeah. So that's what he concluded. The only reason they did this is because they are actually oppressed.
Wow.
And he said, okay, so then what...
So there's no way that someone can do that because they want to protect their nation, they want to protect their family. That's not on the cards.
No.
Like you've been manipulated to think that. Is that kind of the underlying thing?
Yeah.
So that will come from someone who's quite rebellious and prideful, saying that, but then they want to put a government in place that kind of does the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is very ironic. Anyway,
Yeah. So he said this was the hegemony of the bourgeoisie's ideas.
Yes.
And that the working class was actually controlled by this ideology, the superstructure. And the superstructure was controlling them, and this was actually no longer an economic control, but a cultural control.
Okay.
So you move from the analysis from an economic into cultural. And so he said that this bourgeoisie hegemony of cultural control was what? Your family, the church, the nation, all of these structures that needed to be unraveled to free the oppressed.
So we need a cultural revolution.
Absolutely.
That's how they got there.
That's how they got there. So you need to change all of these structures to have this, and these norms and values. So actually all the norms and values and the structures, the family, the church, even the state, how it operates, the nation, which have created for stable civil societies, have been presented as structures of dominance.
Wow.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there can be an argument made for that because it has been not always done in a healthy way.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't take away from the fact that there is a healthy way that God intended for things to happen, right? But unfortunately, some people in power and, some men haven't been good to their wives and their children over time. So then now it's easy to just point at the negative stuff and say, see, that's what happens.
Yes.
But that's not the overwhelming truth. The overwhelming truth is that most normal people are actually they want to live in peace. They have good enough marriages. They have good enough families. And they want a nation that's protected.
Yes.
But now that was all challenged because of the few things that they probably experienced themselves. Yes. And now they trying to get a cultural revolution. Wow.
Yes, yeah. So you kind of you build this on what we call like the outliers, and those so a state which abuses people like what we saw in Zimbabwe, and like we saw under Idi Amin and under Hitler, etc. So because of those abuses, then the state must be undone.
Yeah.
No, they were abused because why humans are fallible, and that's why we need to limit the authority of them because we know they are and they corrupt. And the same as you say, like there have been abusive fathers, but just because you've got abusive fathers, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, you don't take out family because I mean the part of the cultural revolution is to completely redefine.
Yes.
Man, woman, family, and everything else. So.
All the structures.
Sure.
But again, there's empirical research on the importance of the family and the two-parent privilege. Have you heard of this book?
No.
It's Melissa, I can't think of her surname, but it's called The Two-Parent Privilege. She's an economist. I don't know if she's a believer, but she's an economist who studied what creates the most stable, healthy family or outcome for children.
Wow.
It's a two-parent family.
Of course. It's God's way.
Yeah, a biological mother and a biological father.
It's this most stable environment.
So the outcome, you can trace the outcomes of successful children, and that's for boys. What will ensure that they avoid going to drugs, going to prison, going to gangs.
Yeah.
A mother and a father.
Amazing.
What ensures for girls that they don't go get pregnant early.
Promiscuous lifestyle.
Yeah, that they actually get a good education, that they pursue a healthy marriage. A healthy mother and father
all comes
family.
Back to that.
Yeah,
it makes so much sense when I've been with the World Needs a Father, the Dad's Talks, those programs they do, and they have statistics showing similar things. In a fatherless home, or a child coming from a fatherless home has a more than 70% chance to end up in jail, drug addicted, being exposed to stuff they shouldn't be exposed to, and the stats are just horrific if there's no father. Even more so if there's no father or mother. You can just imagine. But but they are advocating for that. I mean, there's books called Abolishment of the Family, and they write about this stuff, right? I mean, even Marx spoke about abolishment of the family. And this is the core nucleus of society.
Yes.
But they want to take that away. To be replaced by what? The state?
The
socialist state?
It will be the state because once you've destroyed all these other spheres of government, what have you got?
Yeah.
Because you will have chaos. And then when there's chaos and when there's like a void, a structure will come in, and it will be the state, which will overarch and which will be obviously this concentration of power with humans in control.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have exactly what you had in Cambodia with the Khmer Rouge, what you had in the Soviet Union under Stalin and Lenin, what you had in communist China, where there's no contention for power because there's just one power relation.
Yeah. So it's either the state or the state and probably, syndicates, cartels, mafias that's going to fill the gap of running the show. Yeah. And then it might end up being the mafia running everything with the state kind of as the front man. And because there's no structure, there's no protection of what is supposed to be. Okay, so all these things play in, and then, we feel it locally in our school. Yeah. And then there's all this pushback when you say anything. Yeah. Because you're unloving. Yeah. So what do we say to Christians, believers, or just people that are conservative in their thinking, which there's many of? I've been picking up, there's a lot of people who may not call themselves Christians or believers, but they just go, this is nuts. Like, this
Yeah.
doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Because they're just rational, common sense people.
Yeah.
So how do we navigate? How do we respond? How do we handle this? Because, and this is what I want this podcast to always be about, is we need to know more.
Yeah.
Now that we know, how do we respond?
Yeah.
And how do we articulate what we believe?
Yeah.
And how do we do this? So the Bible says, be as wise as a serpent, as gentle as a dove. So how do we, and then we should always tell the truth with love.
Yes.
So what do you think that
Yeah.
looks like
Yeah.
in the world we live in now? Because we have to be solution orientated, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. I think that the first thing is to equip ourselves, and I think that's part of like my passion is to equip Christians and to equip the body. So what is going on? You think this is loving and kind, but where does it come from, and what are its fruits?
Yes.
So we
That's
actually
a great question.
yeah. So we have to be engaged.
Mm.
There's no place us sitting back. I mean, if there was sitting
Heads out of the sand.
yeah.
Come on.
If we could sit back, the Lord would have taken us away. But
Yeah.
we are co-laborers with Christ. We're
Yes.
ambassadors of Christ.
Yes.
And we're supposed to be salt and light in this earth. And that also means shining light where there's darkness. And shining light where it is actually leading to the destruction of people.
Yes.
We are supposed to be for people.
Exactly.
And for a thriving society.
Yeah.
So we need to equip ourselves. What does it mean? What makes for a thriving society? And I would say, let's go back to the word, because the Lord knows what makes for a thriving society.
Yeah, I mean, you've done the study, you've seen it yourself. Yeah, it's there.
And does it align? So what are we seeing in the world? So are we approaching the world through its lens, or are we approaching it through the lens of the word? And as a good father, as a good creator, as the Lord of all, as King of Kings, let's go to his word, and then let's say, okay, does this align? So I think the first and foremost thing, people need to get back to the word.
Yeah.
They need to read the word, and they need to get their lens correct,
Yeah.
instead of having a cultural focus lens, because the air that we breathe at the moment is this critical social theory.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Yeah, it's permeated the atmosphere somehow.
Yeah.
I mean, someone like Simon Brace contends that this comes mainly from the universities.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? And
Yeah.
what do you see at Stellenbosch happening in that sense?
Yeah. So just when I ended with the whole thing of Gramsci, and this idea that it's this cultural hegemony. So that's then they moved with the Frankfurt School during World War II. They moved across to America and established the so-called Frankfurt School. There was the Institute for Social Studies or something
Yes.
like that, and then they established there. And what has happened is that these ideas, very interestingly, because America was so anti-communist, but it infiltrated and went into the universities. And they're exciting ideas, because in ideas is ivory tower. You can think
Yeah.
blue skies.
Yeah.
But the problem with the social sciences is that's not always tested. So you can't have blue sky ideas as an engineer, because that bridge has to stand.
Yeah.
That building has to stand. The
Yes.
foundations have to be strong.
Yeah.
But with
You
social
can't second guess it. It has to work.
yeah, it gets tested.
Yeah.
But with social sciences, and this is the concern, is that if there's not a contention happening, and this is where the problem comes in what's happened inside the university, and this is globally, and this has been studied by Professor Jonathan Haidt, HIDT. He's a psychologist. What he found is that where in the academia you used to have those who are leaning to the left and those who are leaning to the right, generally you get those who lean to the left.
Yeah. It's
predominantly.
typically more liberal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But those who lean more conservatively or to the right, there was always enough that there was this kind of like sharpening on each other.
Okay. A bit of balance.
A bit of balance. But what has happened is that the conservative, the more right, they've essentially left the academia, been pushed out in silence. So that sharpening is not happening, and definitely this is what's been happening in the US. So this idea of the critical social theory has permeated into everything, and it's
because there was no essential pushback
Yeah.
on a level that mattered. Maybe there was, but
Yeah.
they were silenced or discredited or pushed away.
Absolutely. And it's so what this critical social theory is a moralistic social analysis, or a moralistic cultural analysis.
Okay.
So it comes from the idea of we know We know best. Remember, this is you can hear the roots of it.
Yeah.
And what the rest of the society doesn't understand, they're in false consciousness. But now, so what has happened is that university, the telos, or the purpose of a university, and I'm not saying this is everywhere, and there's definitely still pockets of really good academia, is that it's moved into what should be in terms of instead of what is. So the purpose of a university has shifted from studying the empirical, what do we see? What do we understand by that? What are the consequences of that? Where does that come from? Into, I know that because this whole critical social justice says that the whole world is structured in terms of power, and those who have power and those who don't have power, and those who have power will use that power to abuse those and oppress those who don't have power.
Wow.
And so everything is structural. And everything is so. It's a system of structural oppression. It's a system of structural racism.
Yeah.
And so everything is analyzed in that way, and they see themselves as moralistic because they're coming to set the captives free in a different perspective, from a different. So they are coming to release the oppressed.
Wow.
But they define who the oppressed are. They define why they are oppressed. And then
they also define the oppressors.
Exactly.
And what is oppression? What is oppressing? What is being oppressed?
But remember, there's that cultural thing. So what is now? Okay, the problem was culture. So what were the institutions of culture? So it's family, it's marriage, it's church. So you have to kind of disrupt and undo those things, because then
dismantle them.
Then they're going to be released. And you're going to give
There's
them liberty.
Freedom. So liberty from the constraints of that which was always normative and healthy. Let's just take it all away. And what do you think they hope will come in the place of that? I mean,
I can't answer that for them.
Do they have a solution?
No.
What do you think is really behind this whole move? Because it does seem to be supernatural in a way.
Remember in the Colossians, it says the vain philosophies and the elemental spirits of this world. If you look at it as in contention with God's purpose and God's plans. So it's against marriage, a mother and a father, family. It's against the church and the moral structures of self-control, because it actually wants to, because it says any of those, that self-control, that moral self-control, it wants to unbundle all of that, because it says that you need to be set free. And in the same way with this whole map, what's it?
Minor
attracted persons is they see that as actually you're not allowing children to freely express their sexual rights.
Oh my goodness!
And who's stopping that? Who's stopping that? Well, parents. So who are the oppressors in this situation?
The parents.
The parents are the oppressors. So that's where all of this comes from.
Then you can understand why a school would, as they say, affirm a child's choice in gender without informing the parents. That's why a school would even let a girl have an abortion without informing the parents.
Absolutely.
They are jumping in where they should not be jumping in, because the parents are the oppressors.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So everything has been twisted and everything has been turned.
Wow. And now even in South Africa, I know from someone like Michael Swain that there's an attack on parental rights in school. They want to take more away from school governing bodies, from parents. They want to have more control. So it's happening here as well. And we have to be aware of that. We have to be aware, I believe, and I'll just say it, that our government is pawns in a bigger thing that's happening globally of destroying family, destroying marriage, destroying children. And, if we think ultimately we have an enemy who wants to kill, steal, and destroy. And you've said it so beautifully today that look at the empirical evidence, look at where it comes from, look at the fruit. Just look at that. And what does it tell you? And I think we can learn so much from that. And the other way around, I would say to people that are listening that, like I said, might not be Christians, but are conservative in their thinking. Look at the Bible. Look at the fruit of someone, living it out in the healthy, right way, not in the, because there are interesting, obviously, directions in Christianity as well. But when someone truly loves God, lives out His commandments, and they are a positive influence on the society. I mean, look at that as well, and compare the two.
Yes.
Just compare the two.
Yeah.
This is the fruit of a true Christian. This is the fruit of the broken world. These ideologies. Let's just compare that. What does it look like?
Yeah.
And I think that would shed a lot of light, hopefully. But even when I'm saying that, I know that the problem is that I'm expecting people to make a rational conclusion based on truth. And I think we have this challenge at the moment in the world that there's part of this thing is they don't believe in objective reality. So how do we communicate? How do you talk to someone like that? Have you had that experience where you give facts and you give information and empirical evidence and someone just goes, no, I don't believe that.
Yeah.
Have you had that?
Well, I've marked work like that. It's very difficult to mark.
I can imagine.
Because you're like, how did you get there?
Yeah.
And what are you basing that?
Okay.
How do you substantiate that?
Wow.
But it's if you use all the kind of correct words. Heinz, I do want to say that I think most people are more based in reality, like your everyday person.
Yeah.
I think if you tell them, what makes for a healthy society, and you kind of speak about like the importance of a family and the structure of a family and the social network that it creates, and when it's healthy, and then the importance of a school which has boundaries and that actually is not used as a conduit for ideological transference, but actually for teaching
education.
subjects and education.
Yeah, that would be an amazing idea.
Yeah. And then a state that actually protects your boundaries and actually protects the citizens inside of it. I think people, and I experience this with the students as well, I find that people respond to truth. And truth, because it works. And
you mean they respond positively to truth? Yeah,
positively to truth.
Yes.
So in the same way that, yes, these ideas are coming out of, some of them are coming out of the university. Well, many of them are coming out of the university. And people are taken with it. In the same way, I also sense that there is eternity in each of our hearts.
Yes.
And when you confront people with truth, I do think that there's a hunger and a thirst in people's hearts for truth.
Come on.
So, and I see that when I teach something which is I know to be good and healthy for society and to be true, I see a response.
Come on.
I see the students respond to it. Yeah.
Well, that gives you hope.
Yes.
And that's, I mean, we can talk about the negative stuff, but what are some of the positive things you've witnessed on campus with students, like what you're mentioning now, that positive response? Do you see that there's at least a grouping of students who are not falling for this stuff and standing up for truth?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of activity happening. I mean, this is a battleground. There's no doubt that there's a battleground happening.
Yeah.
But if you look at the churches that are growing in Stellenbosch, as in particular, and like all of a sudden a church like I'll give you one example, Christchurch, which has had to they've got like 3 evening services because the young people are coming.
Great.
They are thirsty.
Awesome.
And churches which are springing up and really kind of reaching out with truth, not with the culture, but with truth.
Standing on the word of God.
Absolutely.
So you see, like you said, people are hungry for that.
They're hungry for it. And then even Ratio Christi is doing beautifully. And that's when that reasoning together. I mean, you're dealing with hearts and minds.
Yeah.
And allowing the young people to come and engage with the word and engage with it's meaty. The word is meaty.
Yeah.
It's something to be engaged with and
absolutely.
And apologetics. So I'm seeing that happening as well. And I actually think there's also in the new generation there's this level of conservativeness that's coming through.
Yeah.
Like a return away. It's like the pendulum for me. I think is swinging away. That this emptiness is this. I mean, they call it this anxious generation. We've got a young group of people who are so empty, and I think that emptiness is also translated into a call, in their hearts.
Yeah.
So I think we need to be ready to respond to it as the church and the body. I think the harvest is plentiful.
Come on.
Yeah.
That's exciting. It's beautiful. I want to thank you for what you do, what you are doing. I want to thank you publicly for coming alongside me and others to also just lend a hand and and just stand, to take a stand against stuff. You go, this is actually not okay.
No.
We have this a way to do it. And you've got a very gentle way to do it, which I think is commendable and inspiring. So thank you for that. And thanks for joining me today. I pray that your work will be blessed and your marriage and your family and that God will just give you even more platforms where you can share what's on your heart. So thank you for teaching me today and for all those listening, and may God bless you.
No, pleasure. Thanks, Heinz.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of In HeinzSight BoldCast. I trust that you learned something and feel a little bit more bold than before watching it. Please remember to subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so yet. Hit that bell button so you know when the next video comes. And please like the video and share it with your friends. We also want to invite you to leave comments and questions so that we can know how you are experiencing these videos and this channel. We are so grateful that you're part of our community, and we look forward to seeing you back here. Once again, thanks for watching, and remember, boldness is contagious.